There to greet again, I speak so carefully. What we share is leap, sleep, creeping therapies of what I dare to be. As I prepare to free my mind, I feel the split perception, dissident, introspection. Then again, I feel the question where to start.
Double barrels.
Yes.
On another channel.
Sometimes.
Limelight.
Yes.
Here. Yes.
We've done it.
We have done it.
I think.
Yeah. Right, so a lot of people would probably know you first and foremost as founder of VoiceBox, which obviously is a poetry night. And I read an interview really recently, someone interviewed you about your poetry influences, and you just named a bunch of rappers, essentially.
Yes.
Obviously, though, you perform poetry and rap. So where I wanted to start was, do you see any difference in the content of rap and poetry, or can you put a poem to a rap later on? Do you have to change anything for content-wise if you're writing poetry versus writing rap?
I don't think so personally. I think there's a very simple sort of duality to poetry, and that if you just put a rhythm in that allows it to sit on beat, it can be done very quickly, very easily. You don't have to talk about the things that people would deem cliche or stereotypical hip-hop in order to be making hip-hop. I think that's a nonsense that people sort of dismiss the genre with, and they need to get out of their own way. I know it's a hostile start to the interview, right? But I've run workshops before where I sort of borrowed something that I saw from Hip Hop Shakespeare, where they call out a Shakespeare lyric and then call out a rap lyric, and they get the crowd to sort of say, which one do you think it is, Shakespeare or a rapper? And they get it wrong. So I did the same thing by giving a room of students just written down some poetry, some rap lyrics. Which one do you think's a poem? Which one do you think's a rap song? Which one do you think's both? And maybe 20% of the sort of content was in the right place, in order to sort of show them, look, these can all be one and the same. Stop trying to box things.
So when you first were hearing rap music and you were getting into that, how long did it take from transferring that into writing poetry? Did you sort of did you try and write in a traditional poetry style first, or were you able to sort of take what you were hearing and put that down on page as what would be spoken word and then rap?
Yeah, I definitely wrote traditional poetry to begin with. So when I was maybe 14, 15, was probably the first time I'd ever heard swear words within traditional poetry, in that my brother decided in our living room to read out This Be the Verse by Philip Larkin, which opens with, "They fuck you up, your mum and dad," which I thought was interesting, and more so because he was doing it in front of my parents and they sort of allowed it, and I was like, what's going on? And it's just, it's because it's Larkin. And I was like, all right, cool. So I started reading a bit more at that sort of period of time in terms of getting into the traditional poetry. I personally quite like breaking down structures, toying with things, changing things so that they're different. I like the ideas of like concrete poems, things that look like what you're talking about. I toyed with sonnets and the idea of the 14 and the 10, and sort of switched that. So I started with 14 for the first two, 12 for the next two, 10 for the next two, and had it so it literally condensed as you went down, and I'd try and relate it to things that would have a similar thing. So when I did the reverse, starting at the 2-syllable, going up to the 14-syllable per line, I then was like climbing a mountain or something, so you're scaling to a higher point, so that I could mirror the words with the structure. There's other ones that I've done where I tried to reflect the shape of DNA, which was very tricky, so that I'd written it on the page so that you had to, so you had to read the first line down like that, and then come back on yourself to get to the end of the poem. So yeah, I started off doing traditional page poetry, and it took a fair while before I actually decided to start getting up and reading in front of anyone. I used to attend a writing group with Aled Lewis Evans when I was maybe 15, 16, shout out Aled. And I was the youngest there by a considerable sort of gap, but it gave me a chance to look at what I considered poetry, what I considered interesting, I guess, and what I could then turn from my era and my listening, my reading, into a new generation in the area, which I guess later would have sort of helped me develop further ideas.
So do you think hip-hop could be taught within the context of classroom, within poetry classes? You know, when people sort of argue that obviously you have to learn Shakespeare and more great Shakespeare, you've got a lot to sort of obviously apply to that. But it's been a big argument lately, especially with hip-hop Shakespeare, for example. Would you take hip-hop into classrooms that would be beneficial for people to learn about that?
I reckon it would be exceptionally easy. I think it's just about, as much as you probably don't always want to conform to a system, the idea would probably be choosing the correct content to allow a school or a governing body to say, yes, we see how this could be taught, we could see how this could be put into a curriculum without having anything that would maybe be negative or have ill connotations to it. So like I would go atmosphere, POS, Aesop Rock, I think NF would be an interesting shout because he's a clean image, from what I know of him anyway. Correct me if I'm wrong. They'd be the first ones to spring to mind. I think there would be an argument to get your big names and your Eminems and things just on the basis of there are very few that rhyme like that.
Yeah.
But that's where I think schools would sort of go, but what's he talking about? And you'd go, yeah, all right, fair enough.
Guilty conscience and Shakespeare.
Yeah, because the other person I'd maybe go to would be a rapper called Idea. He's got some incredible rhyme patterns in there, but a lot of his lyrics are linked to things like depression, and he is now deceased. So it might be one where the schools would sort of go, yeah, this carries the wrong message. So I think it's just about finding the ones that have the correct level of content. I think Aesop Rock's a brilliant example. Atmosphere, the song I'm thinking of would be The Last to Say, which is teaching that domestic violence isn't okay. So you could even use that in sort of like a counselling sense within education. I think there's arguments for it that sat in front of everyone's face if they go beyond the charts.
Yeah, totally. And then for your own self, from transitioning to poetry and then performing hip-hop, and especially then going into a hip-hop collective for a short while, what were the difficulties, if there were any, or how did you find that transition, whether it be writing process, performing process, any sense?
I think, it'd be the process of creation. So I personally, I'm aware of what my working style is. I know that I'm quite direct. I know that I want people to be direct with me. I know Skinny Bill, who's in the room, loves occasionally throwing a lyric to me and going like, tell me that, is this rubbish? And like, I need that myself. I need to have someone that I can send lyrics to and just go, does this work? And I'm quite happy to do that face to face. Sometimes it doesn't work very well in a sort of group, and it could have caused friction and things. I'm comfortable with that. I know what my strengths are, I know what my weaknesses are. But in terms of my, I guess, isolated process, the big change for me was going from reading things in public to learning my material, and establishing how I could learn my material. So recently had a moment where someone came up to me after a performance and they were like, how do you know all of that? And I just sort of had these flashbacks of me going up to other performers and saying the same thing. And for me at the moment, I learn things with rhyme. If they've got heavy rhyme, I can learn it pretty fast. I annoy my wife with it, I annoy my cats with it, I now annoy my daughter with it, I annoy Dave with it, I will annoy anyone possible until I have it embedded. And then it allows me to sort of have that ready in stock, so if I'm stepping on a stage and I'm maybe in a new environment, I can have my comfort piece, which would probably be Float at the moment, the I Want to Float, Where's the Boy piece. And then the other thing would be back from hosting Voicebox, my wife Jade, shout outs Jade, she's going to hate me using her name, but this is an official format, her advice was literally, the words were, you know how you're weird? Just be weird.
She had a point.
Yeah, and I was like, all right, sound. I'll get as uncomfortable as I can probably feel on the stage, and it makes the other performers coming up have a sort of safety net, so that when they're coming up, they know they can get equally weird.
On that writing, we sort of broke down into your style a little bit of it, but is there a process you have to go through to write, and do you change it at all now? If you sort of sit down, do you go, I'm going to write a poem or I'm going to write a hip-hop piece? Is there anything that changes in that process for you now?
These days I'm very much constantly writing an amalgamation of the two. I write when I'm tired, that's the thing basically. So if it's hitting 2 a.m. and I know I should be going to sleep, that's probably when I'm going to have an idea. Sometimes it's idle journeys, so if I'm on my way to work, I can have just a line will pop into my mind and I'll need to just keep running that in my head until I get home and I can write about that idea. So I had one a while ago about racing clouds, and that was literally just I was driving along and saw that the cloud was moving at literally the same time as me. The writing process then, it's more about how I edit, I think. That's probably the key detail for me, is I don't write, return and edit. I will write maybe 8 lines, get annoyed by them, change the bits I need to, then move forward. So by the time I finish the piece, I deem it a finished piece. I don't want to come back to it and have to amend it.
Especially how many words you write, I don't want to either.
Well, yeah, and I guess that helps me to learn it as well, in that I'm constantly running back to the start to reread. So I will always edit as I'm going along, so there'll be scribbles through things that I've handwritten, which I do a bit less these days. A lot of it's on my phone because of writing on the move and things. but there'll have been sort of 12 drafts before I get to the end. But I'd never write a first draft, come back to it, write a second draft, come back to it, write a third draft, and then go, okay, number 3 is the right one. I have one that I'll constantly scratch and change.
Okay, cool. Finally, before you go, obviously, I said before, most people would sort of know you as the founder of VoiceBox. That's like now over 5 years since that started. What are the biggest changes, whether it be for you personally or as a scene in a whole, that you've sort of seen within the creative scene that you've been part of? Like, what's been the biggest change in those 5 years?
The thing I wanted to change when I initially started the night was the demographic attending. And that the writing groups I'd been to and the events I'd seen elsewhere showed me it was possible. But locally we did have an older audience, which isn't a negative thing in any way, but I don't feel like these sorts of events give the chance to educate people and change people's views and allow people new opinions without having separate demographics attending. Yeah. So once I got to a point where I think our oldest person through VoiceBox performing was, I think, over 70, and then our youngest was 15. Yeah. That was when I was like, okay, that's the span I want. That's the sort of age range that should be in that audience, because there's not many places where you'll get. So if you were to take matters of sort of sexism, racism, Brexit, things like that, you don't get many environments where you could potentially have a 72-year-old writing about it and then a 16-year-old writing about it, probably with two very different experiences of the country, knowledge of politics, knowledge of family, friends, etc. They're going to be completely different, and you don't get many situations where they can engage with each other, and that's the sort of thing that I wanted to begin with. I think it's come a long way to get there, but 5 years in, I think, I hope I've done a job of getting those sorts of people into one room. Another thing would be getting the people who do traditional poetry to hear local rappers and be happy to share a platform with them, because there's not, thankfully, been a point where anyone in the room has sort of gone, why have you got this rapper on stage? Yeah, this is a poetry night. Because quite early on I wanted to set a boundary so I could say, I want poets, I want storytellers, I want rappers, I want beatboxers, I want ventriloquists. Still didn't manage the ventriloquist thing, if any of you are out there.
We could just get a tall and short person.
Yeah, I wanted everything. That was the idea. So I think, yeah, getting the variety in the demographic and the audience was the change I saw.
Yeah. And is there a change now that you see as like a new sort of challenge, that whether it be yourself taking it on or the scene as a whole, what do you think that like next step should be moving forward?
I guess the next step is to get people outside of Wrexham to recognise what we have building here and have been building here for some time. I think everything going on at Larynx is going to come a long way and help that. I think having handed VoiceBox over to you directly is going to help that, getting the social media platform and getting the connections in the right place. But I think getting people to maybe go, Wrexham, that's Focus Wales, that's VoiceBox, that's Larynx, that's Evra Rose, that's Sophie McKean, and having that as the first connection is probably what I would say the next thing is. I think we've got the roots now, and it's just a case of moving on from there and getting people to recognise it.
Totally. Cool. Thanks for being here today.
Nice one.
We'll see you around. What should we do to have an awkward outro?
Outro!
Sick.